What it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. With a 98-120 Game 6 loss, the 2023-24 Milwaukee Bucks season has officially come to an end. Let's talk about it and what this summer might have in front of it on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical File podcast as well as the Pack a Day pod. Joining me is Frank Madden, longtime voice of the pod and the founder of BrewHoop.com. We appreciate you for tuning in and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast as well as on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And we got to talk more about Monopoly Go, the fast-paced game that lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes, like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Frank, what a season it has been for the Milwaukee Bucks, up and down throughout. And then come this playoff series here against the Pacers. We saw a valiant effort in game 3. They came up short. We saw a really great effort in game 5 for the Bucks to extend this series to Indiana tonight for game 6. And they did that in game 5 without Dame or Giannis, of course, becoming the first team in the playoffs to win without their top 2 scorers from the regular season. Heading to game 6 today, there were question marks about if Dame or Giannis would play in this one. It was something to keep an eye on all the way up the tip. Dame was a go, while Giannis was unable to. And even with the return of Dame, the Bucks could not find a way to pull off this Game 6 victory and extend the series to have Game 7 back in Milwaukee. So now, for the second straight year, the Bucks have been eliminated in the first round. And for the third straight year, fourth if you want to also include the finals run, but injuries have played a part. Not the big part, not the only part, but a big part in the outcome of the playoff series for the Bucks. I mean, you think of 22 with that Celtic series, how that went without Chris Middleton. Last year, the Heat series without Giannis. This year, without Giannis against the Pacers, and then without Dame for stretches. Injuries, part of the game, played a big part for sure. Kudos to the Bucks that did play and grinded it out, but man, tough way to go out again.
Yeah, just just a weird season. And, I was saying with Justin the other night, it's bizarre that we were watching this Bucks, first round playoffs series trend towards a loss. And the fact that, a lot of us were sort of at this point of like, oh, well, proud of the guys,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a weird place to be with the team for a team that had championship ambitions
Yeah.
by the end of the year to be kind of just feeling like, well, good try, guys. And obviously that's reflective of the injuries. And, I don't know what the Bucks as an organization are going to make of all of this summer, given the lack of any Giannis in this first round and the fact that Dame was, either out or hobbled for roughly half of the series. It's tempting to say, well, like we still haven't lost a playoff series since we won a championship when our guys are healthy. But I think clearly the struggles during the regular season were reflective of issues that this team has, roster
Mm-hmm.
construction problems that this team has. I think the Pacers were probably I don't want to say the most interesting team to play in the first round, but certainly an interesting foil for this franchise, given they like to exploit some of the inherent weaknesses that the roster has in terms of age and inability to play fast and lack of athleticism and all that. So again, they don't schedule the playoffs based on when everybody's healthy. It's just it is what it happens when it happens. And the timing of Giannis's injury was really unfortunate. I think would be interesting to be inside, the four walls of the training center to know how people are feeling about the decision to play Giannis through injuries late in the year. I think certainly the teams floundering late in the year created undue pressure on Giannis and Dame to play in games that, ideally you would have liked to rest them on, second nights of back-to-backs and things like that. We'll never know what might have happened, health-wise, if maybe they could have taken better care of Giannis and, given him more rest down the stretch. But, you reap what you sow in that regard. And, what had been Giannis's most durable season for quite some time, completely flipped. And at the end of the day, he once again was unable to make enough of an impact, and because he couldn't play at all this time, right?
Yeah.
Last year he missed a couple games, missed like 2.5 games. This year he misses all 6, and I don't know. I don't know what that means for how the Bucks are going to handle him next year, whatever it might be. But it's certainly going to be a long summer for the Bucks, just having to rethink where they are as a franchise, because I think they're kind of trending in a position now where, as much as the ambition is still a championship, I mean, they got to build a team that can get out of the first round. Like at this point, like we're back to winning a playoff round would be a nice thing, even if that's not the ultimate goal. So yeah, just strange way to end a strange year. Not surprised in the least that they fell apart today. Again, like the talent just isn't there when you don't have Giannis. But again, big credit to Dame in particular for leaving it all out on the floor, playing when he really probably shouldn't. And thankfully he didn't injure himself more seriously. And Chris Middleton, had his worst game of the first round. But I mean, what you can't have anything but admiration for the way that he stepped up in this first round, especially with seemingly everybody else getting injured, ejected, whatever else might have happened. So yeah, disappointing end to a disappointing season, but probably the weirdest way the season could have ended too.
Feels kind of fitting though, based on how this regular season went for the Bucks, that it would end in a way where you're like, this just, what a way to go out. But definitely shout out to Chris Middleton. They showed a clip on the Bally broadcast of Chris on the bench having the towel over his head, just looking really emotional once him and Dame were out the game. And it was kind of in the cards that the Bucks were not going to find a way to come back in this game. And seeing the emotion that he had, all I could do was just like, man, Chris, like I feel it. Like you gave everything that you had in this series. You came in with, the bad ankle, twisted your other ankle. And in this series, Chris averaged about 25 points a game, 9 rebounds a game, almost 5 assists, shot 48% from the field, 35% from 3. He had his second highest playoff field goal percentage of his career, tied for the most points per game in his playoff career here, had a playoff career high in rebounds. And he did this while averaging 38.4 minutes a game, which is his highest minutes per game in the playoffs since the finals run 2021. So there's a lot of good from Chris Middleton that came out of this series. You mentioned Dame and shouting him out going to play for it. He mentioned he wasn't sure if he'd be able to, and he kind of went out there, tested his ankle, see if he could jump off that right foot, see how that felt. And he realized like little uncomfort, but F it. Like, I'm gonna just go out here and see how this all falls for us. And he was like, I would just feel bad had I not gone out and at least tried to help my guys in this particular game. So I have nothing but respect and admiration for Damian Lillard as well. Like you mentioned, Chris Middleton. Of course, we can talk a little bit more about Bobby and Brooke as well when we come back on the other side of the break, as well as just some things that happened in this game that didn't go in the Bucks' way. A lot of familiar themes I felt in this Bucks loss to the Pacers that we've seen in other losses to the Pacers as well. So on the other side of the break, want to talk a bit more about the game itself and other Bucks whose play stood out in this first round series against the Pacers. So let's get into that after this. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go a little bit more. And I know what you're probably saying, like, Camille, you just talked about Monopoly Go, like flag on a play. I don't want to hear this, but listen, there's just so much good stuff in this game I got to tell you guys about. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. unique stickers you can trade with friends to compete for albums for bigger prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or when you heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or robot machine, and there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it for free right now on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Time is valuable. We appreciate you spending it with us here on Locked On Bucks, and a special shout out to all the everydayers who tune in Monday through Friday. Do you tend to have, like having sports on all day in the background, possibly Fox Sports or ESPN on the TV all day? Might find yourself turning down the volume a bit with all that shouting. If so, make the switch over to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for your everyday need, bringing you the biggest sports stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. So check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Now, Frank, I did mention, of course, we talked about Dame and Chris, shouted them out. Are there any other Bucks who had played that you just want to say, like, hey, kudos to you for what you were able to do in this particular series for the team?
I mean, Andre Jackson, I think, had a couple games where, I thought his impact was really noticeable. Unfortunately, I said it last game, like Gallo having like the random plus 15, and I mean, I didn't, nothing that he did like look particularly impressive to me, but I was already, looking at it thinking like, oh, great. He's going to play in the first half on Thursday and he's going to
First guy
suck.
off the bench.
He's going to suck and we're all going to be pissed. And of course, Doc's going to play him though, because he just like was passable, in this big win at home. And of course that happened. And, I mean, he's done. Like Gallo's done, so not Gallo, but yeah, Andre Jackson Jr., I think at least gave us some flashes of, things that we saw during the year as well. Still one of the weirdest players like we've had in Milwaukee in terms of just his offense. I don't even work on jump shooting, just work on like catching and attacking like a man, like the rim when another human being is near you. Like get like the assistant coaches with like the pads,
swiping them at him
and just like banging on them, and just tell Andre like you can't like drive to the basket and then like pass it out. Like you have to use your ridiculous athleticism to try to like go dunk on these 5'9" assistant coaches. So that would be my Andre Jackson job for the summer. But no, I think we saw some encouraging things from Andre. I think you look at the free agents to be, Malik Beasley, great last game, MIA tonight, kind of a womp way for him to go out in what is presumably his last game as a Buck. He'll be a free agent. They can't offer him more than the minimum. And I mean, I think he certainly showed enough to get more than a minimum contract from somebody. So, so he's presumably going to take more money elsewhere. Good on you, Malik. We'll miss the shimmies. So AJ Green, I think, steps into that role most likely. Maybe not as a starter, but as that kind of designated spot up shooter. And Ajax, I think certainly Jay Crowder's rotation role is up for grabs, given that he was healthy and was completely benched by the last couple of games of the series. So can't blame Mike Budenholzer this year, Jay. Time to look in the mirror a little bit. And an unfortunate and presumptive end to his Bucks tenure, I would guess, for a guy that, hard to believe how much they gave up for him at the trade deadline a year ago. 5 second-round picks, and man, that is a bunch of picks you'll never get back. And really, guy gave you pretty much, well, again, Jay gave you some solid, stretches, and when Chris was out, they were really good with him in the starting five. But for the most part, obviously the Jay Crowder era has been a bust.
Yeah.
And especially in the playoffs, right? You thought like, oh, here's a guy that, you can trust to be a reliable two-way guy in the playoffs, or at least playable in the playoffs. And both years he kind of washes out. So, yeah, I think Ajax, come on down, take those Jay Crowder minutes, AJ, take those Malik Beasley minutes. And then, we'll have to see what else the Bucks can do this summer. We'll be able to talk a lot more about that, obviously, in terms of scenarios. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think Chris was legitimately great all series. Again, didn't quite have it as much tonight.
Yeah.
Did have that little run in the third quarter when he scored 7 points and felt like, okay, he's trying to drag them back. But obviously this was not his game. And I mean, the battle that he and Aaron Nesmith had all series was something to watch, So shout out to Chris for proving the randoms that still, question Chris Middleton, showing what he can do. And obviously you don't want him to have to do what he had to do as far as the load that he had to carry in this series. But, again, another year with Giannis not being able to, not be play at all this year. Obviously he was notably absent for large stretches last year. And, Chris had his second straight year where he put up great numbers while the Bucks did not in the first round series. So I think that, and yeah, I think other than him and Dame, I don't know. I mean, again, like guys battled, Pat Bev battled, blah, blah, blah. But like, you don't want to have to play Pat Bev. What did Pat Bev play this series? Like high 30s or something like that. Like he had 40 plus minute games. There was way too much Pat Bev for a team when you're trying to win a playoff series. But he battled. I think he was part of the scrappiness that ultimately got the Bucks at least a couple wins. But again, like other than that, like pretty spotty results up and down the roster. Brooke Lopez actually had a really effective scoring series, which he always does in the playoffs, but I think the Pacers were a bad matchup for him defensively. And Bobby, I think, his counting stats were there. I think he averaged like 16 and 10 in this series, but you needed better from him. His 3-point shooting was awful. And, I think he had some moments defensively, but, fundamentally he's just too limited as a rim protector. So, again, I think we'll spend the summer kind of wondering what Bobby Portis trade packages might look like. So yeah, it was tough. I mean, collectively you appreciate the effort, but a lot of guys were just being asked to do too much.
Exactly.
And, that was, I think, the story of this series. Like the Bucks role players were just extended beyond their means, and what you get is a series loss.
Yeah, ahead of the game, Justin and I were talking about the Bucks are going to need a big game from a role guy. Like you expect something from Chris, you expect something from Dame if he plays, Brooke, so on and so forth. We're like, there needs to be a role player that kind of pops in this game to help try to extend the series, and that just didn't happen tonight for the Bucks. Instead, the Pacers actually got some big games from some key role guys with career playoff scoring highs from both T.J. McConnell and Obi Toppin. The two of them combined for 41 points. They were the Pacers' leading scorers tonight. It just was one of those games. Like Pacers bench had 50 points, the Bucks bench had 10 points, and we knew the bench was an area for this Bucks team, even when fully healthy. That was something that, like, hey, we're not necessarily depending on that. We're depending on our top three guys to be healthy for them to carry the scoring load and go forward from there. So disappointing to see that as well. And then just you mentioned how the Bucks would kind of get it close in this game, and then they would lose the rope, and they got out to a great start to open the game up, had a nice start to the first quarter, and then the Pacers came back and had like a 23-3 run, made it 29-19 in the first quarter, and the Pacers never trailed after that point. Like the Bucks would threaten throughout the game a few more times. Like in the second quarter, they had a little run there to kind of push the Pacers, but the Pacers responded with another run. I think the Bucks got down to like 4 in the second quarter before the Pacers pushed it back up to 11 in like that last minute heading into overtime. So now you're going into halftime with a double-digit deficit. Third quarter, Bucks were making hay again. And then Bucks get the lead down to like 7. Pacers again push it. 8-0 run to close the quarter. Now you're heading into the fourth quarter down 15. And very quickly in the fourth, did the Pacers say, like, we're not going anywhere. We want to make sure the story ends here. And I will shout out the Pacers a bit here because, I mean, they're to the defense. They're picking up the Bucks players full court throughout the game. They were able to apply a lot of pressure on the perimeter to try to keep the Bucks off of that three-point line, keep them uncomfortable shooting threes. Shout out to the Pacers for that. I mean, you look at like the turnovers. That's an area with this Pacers team we talked about a lot, talking about how fast they play, the transition buckets. And what popped out to me was that the Bucks only had one more turnover than the Pacers, but the Pacers scored 11 more points off of turnovers than the Bucks were able to in this game. Like the Pacers were able to capitalize in a lot of the areas you need to in a playoff game to come out with a victory. And it was also interesting. I was like, made a note to myself, like it feels kind of like Freaky Friday with the free throw shooting, because throughout the series, the Pacers were the team that, was shooting 67, 68% from the free throw line. And the Bucks were shooting around 87%. In this game, the Bucks had a big free throw advantage, got 15 more attempts, but they only shot 66, made 66% of them today, while the Pacers made 88%. A lot of the little things on the margins, the Bucks just got outworked. They got beat and just didn't have enough to try to extend this series a little bit further.
Let me ask you, Camille, what were you expecting in terms of Damian Giannis playing today? Like coming into the day, were you expecting either, both might play?
Yeah, so before today, like I was thinking based on what we were hearing, like it seemed like Giannis might have been closer than what Dame was. So when the injury report came out and it's like now Dame's upgraded to questionable, but Giannis is still doubtful, that shocked me. Like I expected it to be Giannis to be the one to come back, if anything, in this series. So Dame coming back was a pleasant surprise. I know the reports were that both of them were working really hard on it, but yeah, I was shocked that Dame was the one to come back and not Giannis in this one. How about you?
Yeah, I know we talked about this with Justin the other night, and I think Justin had gotten certainly some, a sense from being around the team that Dame was not close, or that, at least a couple of days ago that he seemed likely to be out for the rest of the series. So, was reading just some of his comments post game. I mean, it definitely was touch and go, for him to get out. I mean, just a few days removed from being in a boot and then crutches, like the race to get him to the point where he could actually play in this game was, kind of remarkable in a lot of ways. So, again, like, he was obviously very limited defensively in this game, but I mean, to score 28 on 16 shots, like was a -6, but that was the best of any of the starters, to grit through what he was going through, still drew, 10 free throws. I don't know. I mean, I feel like as like normal people, we sometimes, just underappreciate the ability of these elite athletes to play through all this random stuff. Like the thing that always kills me is like when these guys play with like broken fingers. It's like, Camille, can you imagine like playing like if you're like you or me playing basketball with like a broken finger, let alone being able to like shoot and like deflect passes that are going a million miles an hour. Like I just find it amazing that these guys play through, whether it's muscle injuries, Dame with this like Achilles soreness. Like he was clearly not in possession of his normal burst. Like he had that one drive in the third quarter, like in that semi-transition where it looked like he was going to blow a tire, but he still finished. It was pretty much all step backs, in this game for him, which you understand. But just again speaks to his overall skill level that he was even able to do that. So yeah, I mean, I was hopeful Giannis was ultimately going to go, but obviously just wasn't in the cards. And, I think just kind of speaks to his mortality, like we always talk about his quick healing. And obviously this was longer than what people expected, right? One of the, maybe the first time ever that I want to say he'd never missed more than like 4 or 5 games in a row. I think last year, maybe he missed 5 games in a row at one point. But I mean, yeah, for him to be out basically whatever it was, like over 3 weeks now, right?
Yeah, April 9th is when he hurt his calf.
So, 23 days or so. And, would he have played in Game 7? We'll never know.
Yeah.
But that would have been, closing in on almost 4 weeks with, a calf strain. And again, I don't think anybody's going to question like Giannis's like toughness or whether he wanted to play, wanted to be out there. Because it's not, again, it's not like a sore knee where you can just kind of suck it up and go through it. Like if your calf is literally going to seize up, like, what are you going to do?
It's going to stop you. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, it's kind of funny. It's like, as somebody who, thinks a lot about Giannis's legacy, like, I was talking to some friends about this. Like, if you told me that the Bucks were going to lose, I would have said, well, I hope Giannis doesn't play, because then at least then, like, we're not tainting his involvement, right? Because like even last year, he came back probably too early.
Yeah.
And put up big numbers in both games, but like especially in the second game, he missed tons of free throws, made mistakes, didn't really play that well, down the stretch of that Game 5 in overtime that they lost. And so certainly like some of the stink of that series was on Giannis, even though he gets hurt early in Game 1, misses the next couple of games, etc. So part of me is like, in a very like petty, like pointless way, looks at this and is like, well, at least like Giannis doesn't share in the blame for this, and we can just sit back and be like, well, sorry Pacers, you don't get the legitimacy of having beaten Giannis for even one game. But I mean, whatever, right? Like
I'm sure they don't care. They got the win. They're like, hey, we moved on.
Yeah. The Pacers shouldn't care. I mean, whatever. Like they especially for a team that's, I mean, they haven't won a playoff series in a million years. Like they're thrilled. They should be thrilled regardless. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to give them much of a chance against whoever they play in the next round. I'm currently watching. If you keep seeing me do this, it's because I'm taking a look at the Knicks Philly game, which is right now I think tied late in the late stages of that game. So I don't think they're going to be favored against either of those teams, but whatever. Them winning this playoff series is that their season is a success, right?
Yeah.
Just didn't matter who they're going to beat. So, yeah. So it kind of, again, all of this just is what it is. I had no expectations coming into the series. They win the other night. You kind of get a little bit of a hope.
Yeah.
Maybe that Giannis can play in Game 6. Like, oh, maybe you can steal one in Philly or in Indy. But kind of as we were, worried that it might end up being the case, losing Game 3, letting that opportunity slip away. That was, ultimately what I think cost the Bucks a chance to win the series, because you win that game, that's the road win that you needed to get back at Philly for stealing Philly at Indy for stealing Game 2, and unfortunately, you don't win on the road. You're not gonna win this series. So so I don't know. And I think the interesting thing too is, this gets into the playoffs, like what you do coming out of this, right? Like how much do you use this series how instructive is this series for evaluating this roster and what you do moving forward? It's really hard, because especially with somebody like Brook, who was crucial in kind of keeping them in the game with his scoring for long stretches today, and had a really good scoring series overall. It's like Brook having to play him so much, not having the option of playing small with Giannis, not being able to shield Brook with Giannis on the floor from a defensive standpoint. Again, there's a lot of people, of course, like there's always like the people in my Twitter messages that be like, oh, you got to move Brook, like the drop defense doesn't work anymore. And it's like, again, I'll just say, guys, like if you didn't think the drop defense worked this year, please take a look at what they did when Brook was not on the floor, because they were terrible. Giannis defenses were terrible without Brook this year. So again, they need more pitches, especially in the playoffs. You definitely need to have options that don't involve Brook. We saw it, a couple years ago in the finals where they weren't closed without Brook. But I don't know. I mean, like I think they should be they kind of got to explore a whole lot of options. I'm not trading Chris, Dame, or Giannis this summer. But everybody else, like you do just need to you got to figure out like what what is a different version of the Milwaukee Bucks look like? And you got 23rd pick, the 33rd pick. You now have that, whatever it is, at 2031. You have one of your out year, your kind of furthest out year pick will be available that you can trade on July 1st. So you could put it into a deal on draft night and complete it later. So yeah, a summer of huge decisions, but also like very limited flexibility. So trades are probably to me, that's the biggest question is, can you reshuffle those deck chairs into something that's meaningfully better? I don't know. That's what John
like,
Horst or whoever becomes the GM if he leaves, that's what they're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, can you shuffle the chairs on the deck in a way that improves what you have around your big three? Because I think that this playoff series showed us anything. One, Chris Middleton has value to this team when he's healthy. You saw what Dame can do in the playoffs, and we know Giannis' track record as well. So that's actually something I want to talk about in the next segment. Just a look ahead for some things for the Bucks to consider over the summer, especially since I can talk to you and you're like the Locked On Bucks salary cap guru. So just some couple of questions to think about as we get ready to prepare for some Bucks off-season talk. So let's start queuing that up after this break. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what it is that you're looking for. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, Frank. Now, again, Buck season's come to an end, unfortunately. We're going to have a lot of time to recap the offseason moves to make and everything like that on Locked On Bucks. Although the Bucks regular season has ended, Locked On Bucks is not. We will still be coming to you guys 5 days a week throughout the rest of the playoffs for sure and into free agency as well. So while I have you here, Frank, like I said, as the Locked On Bucks cap expert, how does this Bucks first round exit affect the Bucks cap situation? Because I know Chris Middleton had some unlikely bonuses tied to his contract. Does anything change now with them having this first round exit?
Yeah, so he had a little over $200,000 in bonuses that he would have gotten if the Bucks had made the conference finals, made the finals, and then won the championship. So about 600 some thousand in extra bonuses that were at play there. And essentially, the way the idea of the second apron works is they basically count all those until like they can't be counted, right? So they assume that those unlikely bonuses, for the purposes of these second apron and first apron calculations, that they assume that like those hit. But it's confusing because if you look at like a cap sheet, like just a normal cap number sheet, it'll only show the quote unquote likely bonuses, which again, likely, unlikely, it's only based purely on what happened last year. So because Chris didn't play that many games last year, like his games played bonus was unlikely, and then he fell short of that again because of the injury with the ankle, which saved the Bucks about 1.5 million, and that's the biggest reason they're going to end up under the second apron. So, again, how significant is that? Well, if you're under the second apron, there's some pretty important benefits. Again, this is for the rest of kind of this calendar, this NBA season. So through the end of June, if you're under that second apron, basically you can make trades for take back up to 110% of salary in trades. You can aggregate players. So for instance, you can put Bobby plus Pat's salary together to try to get, someone in the low $20 million range, something like that. Versus if you're over the second apron, you can't add players contracts together to take back a more expensive player. So, I mean, there's definitely advantage to that. If you look at their cap sheet for next year, it's going to be difficult to stay under that second apron next year. Like I was looking at it, like if they kept the 23rd pick, kept the 33rd pick, signed those to like the lowest that they could sign them for. And then, for instance, like you keep Pat Bev and Thanasis on minimum contracts. And then, like bottom line, even if you only do minimum contracts with the current roster, you're going to be a little over that second apron, which again, you can find ways to get under it during the course of the season, but it will limit your ability to make additional moves. It'll limit your ability to trade like far out draft picks. And so there's definitely a motivation to stay under that second apron, especially starting next year. So I would expect that they will try to do that next year. And so the good news is they have a little more flexibility kind of through the draft to make trades. But again, I think I would be, let me just say this, I would be surprised if they do make a trade, like putting Bobby, Pat together or something like that, putting some of those draft picks in there to try to make a big move. I would be surprised if they were like a net salary adding, like if there was a next salary addition through those moves. I would expect they'd probably try to shave a little bit of salary so that they could stay under the second apron next year. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, to me, the questions are, Brooke, even if you really like Brooke, which I think we both really like Brooke,
Got to explore options.
I think he's really important, but yeah, he's an expiring salary, right? So if he walks in a year or something like that, in the summer of 25, you just lost a huge salary slot that you can't replace that salary slot, right? So you have to, I think, figure out what you're going to do with Brooke, especially at his age. And again, I think he has a role on this team. I think the thing for the Bucks to figure out is how do you get more athletic around Brooke so that you have an option to play Brooke less. But again, the challenge is like when Bobby is your third big, Bobby is not athletic. He doesn't play defense well. And so it doesn't really give you, I think, a strong change of pace compared to when you have Brooke, right? You're just kind of like a lot worse defensively and, good offensively because of Bobby's skill set. So that's going to be interesting to watch. And I think Pat Connaughton as well, still 2 years left on that deal. Pat ended up having a pretty efficient season, shooting the ball, scoring the ball. I think his athleticism has been on the decline.
Yep.
We saw in this series, like he just doesn't get shots up anymore. And I think his ball handling they were way too dependent on his ability to bring the ball up and get the team into the offense, which, kudos to him that he can do that at all. I thought he played really well in game 5. But, again, it's like when you have so little financial flexibility to be paying $10 million a year to Pat, when it feels like he's more of an 8th, 9th man production wise right now, rather than a 6th, 7th man, those are just things you have to look at. But I think realistically, if Bobby or Pat had a lot of value, I think there was a good chance those guys would have been moved at the trade deadline. And so I think the fact that they were not probably speaks to the fact that you're not going to go out and get a king's ransom for those guys now. But, we'll look at it. I'll start making some lists, Camille. We'll compare some notes. We'll try to brainstorm.
Oh, yeah.
Are there potential destinations for either of those guys? And then obviously then we'll find out for real, between now and probably early July if the Bucks want to make a move, because certainly having those 2 picks on draft night, puts them in a position where they can either try to restock with some younger guys, refill the young kind of talent pipeline a little bit, or they could look to try to obviously make a move to improve kind of the veteran talent base. And we'll see, right? I think at least with AJ and Ajax, you have at least a couple young guys on cheap contracts for the next couple of years that you can feel like they can be rotation guys.
Yeah.
I haven't mentioned Marjon Beauchamp. I would not look at him as a guy that probably they're going to look to hang on to if someone gives them a trade offer. And probably he's a guy that you could see leaving this summer. But these are all kind of these difficult decisions the Bucks have to make. How do you get younger, more athletic, but then, oh yeah, by the way, still like compete for a championship at the highest level, right? If it was easy, like,
everyone would do it.
Everyone would do it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it is one of those things though where I do think this full off season is going to be good for this team. I mean, we've talked a lot just about the up and down nature of the season, the coaching switch, Dame not being able to get into rhythm with this team. I do think an off season where you can actually build the offense the way that Doc wants it to be built around Dame, Giannis, and Chris will do wonders for this team. But like I mentioned before, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about what the Bucks might look like next year, things they can do this offseason, and just also reevaluating how this season really went for the team. So as we wrap up this season for the Bucks, like I mentioned, we are not wrapping up the season here on Locked On Bucks. So make sure you all keep it locked in. For Frank and myself, I think this is a good place to call it one. So we thank you for listening. Enjoy your weekend, Bucks fans. I know we wanted to be playing basketball longer than this, but this is our reality. So try to enjoy your weekend. Next week, we're going to get back at it and thinking about ways to, here on Locked On Bucks, that the Bucks can improve. So will be a nice landing spot for Bucks fans throughout the summer to voice ideas, opinions, to vent, whatever you might need. So make sure you all keep it locked in. Talk to you guys soon.